moment, all electronics could cease to function. This includes your car, your home, your business, and our entire electrical infrastructure. Learn how you can protect yourself from a massive electrical disturbance today. Visit www.empro.com or call 833-EMP-PRO4 today.
And we're back. Got some familiar faces with me today. Jeff MD, our in-house CIA operative, aka 007, also an engineer, which is very applicable to today's conversation. And below Jeff MD, at least on my screen, is our good friend Randy Nance, Green Beret from Texas. Been friends with him for a long, long time. We haven't seen him in a little while. Welcome back, Randy.
Yep, thank you.
And beside him, Mike Bellemare from Switch It Up. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. Good to be back on.
Right on, right on. So, listen, we don't have Mike Sterling with us today, so it falls on me to do the conflicted question of the day. And I think you've done these before with us, Mike. These are a set of card decks from a company called conflictedthegame.com. And they started this game so that people would put some thought towards post-apocalyptic scenarios. And this one's kind of funny today, to be honest with you. So I'm going to read this question off. The four of us will answer it at the end of this episode. And everybody out there watching, we'd like to see your answers down below in the comments section. So here we go. You are the leader of a prepper group and the grid has gone down. Months have passed with no major issues. One day, one member of your group asks for permission and your blessing to take a second spouse. Neither the intended second spouse or the first spouse has any objections, and the three seem very much in love and supportive of one another. Do you agree to this union, and why? And Jeff, hold your thoughts on this, because Jeff shared some historical information with me on this topic before we hit record. It's pretty funny. It's kind of interesting stuff. So today's video is brought to you by CCW Safe, and I'll show you their webpage quickly here. They'll be the only sponsor for this episode. Here we go, right there, CCW Safe. So ccwsafe.com. We were way back when we were partnered up with a big company who does this type of protection, and we found out that they had a clawback clause. Now, they've never exercised the clawback clause, but it made us uncomfortable that it was there. In other words, they could pay money to defend you if you're in a citizen-involved shooting, then claw it back. Then we were partners with another company in this space who has used a clawback clause. 95% of criminal charges get pled out before it goes to a judge or jury. And if you plead to a lesser charge, even if you're not guilty, it's against the law to pay insurance benefits to somebody who has broken the law. So that clawback clause has been used multiple times by one of the big companies out there. And I'm not naming them because we're not in the business of hurting other people's businesses. I've been going back and forth with CCW Safe for about 18 months now. And we've got it in writing that not only is there no clawback clause, there never will be. So if you get in a citizen-involved shooting, they got the bases covered. And we'll talk a little bit more about CCW Safe in an upcoming episode. Besides that, Mike, I wanted to show a couple of your websites. So as I mentioned, you're the CEO of Switch It Up, and kind of cool that you've got Kevin Harrington on the front page, one of the original Shark Tank sharks, and that you also own EMPPro.com. So before we dive into today's topic, give me the Cliff Notes version on both Switch It Up and EMP Pro so that those people in our audience who haven't seen you before understand your background and where you're coming from.
So Switch It Up is an electrical contractor and a wholesaler. So we wholesale our own products, solar panels, inverters, as well as LED lighting and some electrical commodities. National-based company that we've just been in business for 9 years, started out doing lighting and just kind of spread out. And now with the need for solar, wind, and portable power stations, there's ample opportunity for Switch It Up to grow. We never really worked in the residential space, but with the prepping community in need of solutions for backup power stations, it just seemed like a good idea.
Yeah, that's awesome. And EMP Pro?
EMP Pro, I'm a big solar nerd, so I'm always following solar activity. Obviously, as a Homeland Security major, knowing an EMP attack could happen, but like I always say, the big light bulb in the sky with the increased solar activity. After meeting Andrew from EMP Shield, it just made sense to talk to him and start to advertise his product with turnkey installations for home panels, generators, solar arrays, and my favorite is the one for the vehicle. Those are a top seller.
Right on. I've got some sitting beside me that we'll get into as we carry on the conversation, but let's jump right into grid down. Like I mentioned, it's the number one topic for the survival dispatch audience, not just as far as a concern, but as an interest. Anything that we put out there that's on the topic of grid down gets really good traction because people, rightfully so, are scared of losing power for a long period of time. And all the projections, Jeff, quick question for you, because you have a better memory than I do. What are the projected number of lives lost if the grid were to go down for an extended period of time, like a year or something like that?
Oh God, it was a ridiculously high number, like
Yeah, it's staggering.
70-80% of the population. And it sounds, unbelievable or incredible. But when you think about most of our population lives in cities, cities have no indigenous food sources for the most part. Policing requires power, whether you like it or not. Water purification requires power. Water distribution requires power. If the power grid goes down, and backup generators will kick in, but they run out of fuel eventually, and you're going to have millions of people in an area where they can't travel because the refineries go down without power as well. And when the gas runs out, the gas runs out. So they'll have no transportation, they'll have no food, they'll have no water, and they'll have no security. And sadly, people always tend to go to their most base, and you will have roving bands of just basically animals out there. So it would get real ugly real fast.
Yeah, I agree. So when you said there were no indigenous food sources in cities, it just tweaked me. I saw an interview a while ago, many months ago, where there were these protesters saying that we have to get rid of all the farting cows. We can't have these farting cows.
Or agriculture in general.
Yeah, it's this major calamity. And so the interviewer said to this young girl, said, well, where are people going to get food if you shut down all the farmers and the farting cows? And she looked at the interviewer kind of like this, and she's like, grocery store, fast food restaurant. and the guy, he's holding the mic like this. He didn't know what to say initially. He said, well, if we shut down the farms and we get rid of the farting cows, where are the grocery stores and the fast food restaurants getting their food from? And he puts it in front of the girl, and the girl says, well, exactly where they're getting them right now, wherever that is.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Well, yeah, you do the math. New York City alone would need somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 billion calories of food per day.
Woo.
1 million people, 2,000 calories a day. Do the math. 20 billion. There's no community garden or rooftop box, window boxes where you're growing tomatoes is going to supply that.
Astronomical. So, Mike, a question for you, and it's a big question, and Randy and Jeff, by all means, chime in after Mike. But I've been saying for years we're a first world country with a third world power grid, and you've been saying for years that it's the glass jaw of America, our power grid. So, give our audience an idea of all the different ways that our grid could be taken down. Everything from EMPs on from there. And we'll start the conversation with, okay, here are the things that could potentially happen, and this is why you need to be prepared.
So I'll start with the big one, the big light bulb in the sky. Our sun, as it approaches its solar maximum, the solar activity has been increasing. And for anybody watching, especially in the southern region. If you're seeing the aurora borealis in Florida, for example, it looks really cool, but it's not good. So when the earth gets hit with that CME, it creates a naturally made EMP, which could take the grid down. So that's one of the big ones, and the Carrington level event being the last large one that we have on record, which, if that happened today, would take the grid down.
Explain what happened. That was September 1st, 1859, if memory serves me right.
So the sun released a large solar flare that hit the planet. At that time, we had telegraph lines and the little telegraph machines in the building. And the CME was so large that the telegraph lines caught fire, melted off the poles. And in several reports, the little click device, I forget what it's called, they burst into flames inside the buildings.
So one more thing on the CMEs, because I know you follow space weather and all this stuff really closely. Is it true that if we got hit with a CME that it would affect the entire world, that it's not like one specific spot?
So whatever section of the planet was facing the sun would get the most impact, and then that would kind of spread out through the magnetic field.
Okay.
And it's all theory based, right? So they say that the furthest point on the other side of the planet would be the least affected, but the continent facing the sun, we total blackout.
All right, good to know. What are some other ways that the grid could be taken down?
EMP attack from an enemy nation, whether China, North Korea, Russia, you name it. Low yield, high altitude, or did I say that backwards? But EMP from a weapon could take out the power grid. That would be more centralized, and then rolling effects from the ground zero, probably targeted on larger cities. And so this is new. So I'm working with a government contractor who asked us to partner with him because the workload is abundant right now. The federal government is now forcing all federal installations to replace transformers, phone lines, lighting, anything that had products sent over in the last decade from China that were installed in these installations. They're now forcing them to be replaced with American-made products so they can ensure that there's no chips in it. I mean, Wi-Fi chips, they put those friggin' things in toasters now. So you figure they've been putting this stuff in technology for the last decade, and who do we buy most of our stuff from? China. So the security threat right now to electrical infrastructure, power plants, transformers, you name it, it wouldn't even have to be an attack. If they have some backdoor technology in our systems, they hit a button and it shuts everything off.
That's very disconcerting. You're the first person who's mentioned that, having multiple chips and everything like that. Jeff, did you want to add to that?
I think look at what us and the Israelis did to Iran with the Stuxnet virus. That exploit. And that was targeted at some very specific places. Now, if you unleash that nationwide, what would it do? You could screw up a lot of stuff.
You refresh my memory. Stuxnet, was that like a piece of malware that took?
Yeah, it was malware that went into the Iranian uranium centrifuge program, and it basically told the centrifuges to speed up, slow down, and centrifuges they're extremely high. They're spinning very, very fast. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of RPMs. And when you speed them up and slow them down at random, they end up just flying apart. And that's what the Israelis did to the Iranians. But that could work in a turbine that, you could, if you got into, like, say, the SCADA system for a country, which controls the grid, you could open and close breakers randomly, causing a blackout in one place and a power surge in another, and then switch it, 2 minutes later. So that's a vulnerability. If you get in those systems, you can really screw up a place.
So question for you, Mike, and then I've got a question for Randy after that. I saw a diagram that showed some major transmission lines across the country. And I want to say there was something in the northern U.S. that kind of ran almost coast to coast that said it was a 700 kV line. But most of the other ones shown in the country were 200 kV. if the bad guys got control of our systems and jammed 700,000 volts down a 200,000, transmission line, KV transmission line, what would happen to that transmission line?
The transmission lines aren't sized properly, so there's a good chance that they'd melt off the lines.
Okay.
If they did survive, any of the substations that break the power down to lower voltage to disperse it, those substations would be toast. It'd be really bad for anything on the smaller side.
That's pretty crazy in itself. So they don't even have to step foot in our country. They've hacked into systems. There's your cyber attack, right?
Yeah, there's that. And then we've talked in the past about, you were the one that was telling me about it. Some guys showed up with some rifles and blasted some of the transformer boxes at a substation and caused severe blackouts just by punching holes in these things.
That was the one in North Carolina, Moore County, North Carolina, a few years ago at Christmas time. But when I went and read more on that, by the way, just so everybody knows, there are an average of 24 attacks like that per year across the country, where people just show up and start shooting holes in the transformer buckets that are full of mineral oil or other liquids to cool the transformers. And when the liquid drains out, poof, gone. And I just looked this up, by the way. Right now, those transformers, which we have very few of them stockpiled, are running 36 plus months out to get them from places like Germany and Southeast Asia. But Randy, question for you. I mean, from a military standpoint, if World War III were to break out and we were to see attacks on the homeland, and especially drone attacks, how easy would it be? Like, what kind of defense do we have against this stuff, really? Do we have any defense against large-scale drone attacks to protect our grid, or are we just going to be shit out of luck?
Well, it doesn't appear to me that we have any real protection plan on those things, even though they've been telling us all year that there's going to be a major attack. It doesn't seem like anybody's went and secured those areas and made sure that that's not going to happen. And then you go back to China, who makes almost everything we bring in here, right? And as y'all mentioned, because if anybody thinks that China isn't putting a back door in every electronic they send over to America, you are sadly mistaken. Yeah. They are not our friends, and they don't want to be our friends. That's the truth of the matter. They want to take control of us. That's what they want to do. They want to be the top dog. And so I've been saying, like I said, I've been saying that for years, man. And so, they've war gamed it. We've war gamed it. I'm sure Jeff's heard this. Our DOD and the Pentagon has done this many times. And we know if there's a World War III kicks off, what we can expect from China is to shut down our power grid instantly. They will shut down every satellite up there that has all their electronics in it too instantly. And supposedly the rumor is, unlike Japan in World War II, they will launch a missile attack on every single ship that we have, and certainly all the destroyers and aircraft carriers, all those at one time. And all that will happen simultaneously. All three events will happen simultaneously. So that's what we can expect, most likely, if something like that kicks off.
Every country in the world, if it has an adversary, they look at their adversary and they look for weaknesses. That can be choke points, that can be a refinery that produces something that is only made there, that kind of thing. And you look at what we did to Iraq. I mean, when we went to war with Iraq, we took out their air defense system. We knew where they all were. We mapped them out. We took out the power grid, but without destroying the power generation, because we knew eventually we were going to have to, once we won the war, we're going to have to get them back up and running. So they took out distribution centers. They took down high tension lines, which are relatively easy to put back up. But you're not going to be able to do it instantly. So their grid went completely down. Yep. But we did it in such a way that we could bring it back up relatively quickly afterwards. Will the Chinese do that? Yeah, probably not. I don't think they're looking to occupy the United States. They know they really can't. So they don't care. So they're going to destroy power generation. They're going to destroy the transformers, the distribution centers, all that. And they're scattered all across the country. And you can't really, it's difficult to secure them. It's like, I want to guard everybody everywhere all at once at the same time. Can't do it.
So Randy, follow-up question for you, Randy. And then I've got a question for Mike. if a foreign entity like Russia or China attacks us first, I mean, can we even answer that attack if they take down all the things that you mentioned?
Well, I'll say what I was not privy. I was definitely not in this brief, and I was not classified to the level to know all that stuff. And most of it, if I was, we wouldn't be able to talk about.
Fair enough.
However, I think it would. I think that we came out on the losing side of that scenario, and they ran it like 100 times.
Yeah,
it's one of those. We'll get. Yeah, they may get a meal. We'll definitely get a sandwich. Yeah. But because all it takes is one Triton nuclear submarine to make the cost of such a strike something you really don't want to bear. Yeah. We've reduced the numbers of our nukes on our subs on the missiles, but there's 18 missiles on a Titan II on a Triton submarine. Each one of them is capable of carrying 18 individually targeted nuclear warheads. So 18 times 18, and are you willing to take that? Are you willing to lose 200 cities? That's just one submarine, and we got several. So that's the whole point of them. It's like, no matter what you do to us, we're gonna get you back, and it's gonna be a lot more than you want to absorb.
I think that's why both countries, because even we have, and certainly China has done more tunneling and digging and building compounds underground than ever before, by a long ways, because I think everybody's getting ready for this.
Construction as a concept works.
Yeah.
Because nobody, it's like, I'm not gonna shoot you if even after you're dead, I get shot.
Yeah.
Kind of loses the point.
So 2 questions for you, Mike, and Jeff, Randy, feel free to jump in as well. As far as natural disasters are concerned, what's the risk from natural disasters as far as taking a section of the grid down for an extended period of time? Like if there were massive wildfires out west, if you guys had a huge snow or ice storm in Colorado, or let's say we got hit with several hurricanes back to back, like happened to us in 0405 here, how long are you potentially looking at the grid being taken down just by Mother Nature?
I mean, if it's a severe storm, minimum 3 months, could be 3 months to 2 years. And the chances of the power stations being taken down, the grid being taken down from storms is everly increasing as climate shift, I call it, not climate change. I mean, the Earth's been doing its thing and moving around for a long time. We all know magnetic pole shift. And I don't know if most people realize, but it's not just the magnetics that shift, the continents move with it. That's why True North has been changed at airports all over the world to identify True North again. But the big one with the storms, with weather, is weather modification. There was a treaty that was signed between the world superpowers to not use weather modification against each other, but we know they are. You can dust a storm to make it go away, or you could dust a storm to increase it. I mean, was it last year, Chris? They came with a Category 6 hurricane for the first time.
Well, they said they were going to create new Category 6 because the Cat 5 just didn't do it any justice, is what they were saying. But I don't know if they've officially adopted that or not. But here's my next question for you, Mike. And again, Jeff and Randy, feel free to jump in. Can the grid be protected? And if it could be protected, what would have to be done to protect it? So, Mike, go to you first.
So to start to touch back on a CME or an EMP, the fastest way, and I believe Andrew and his team have been working on this, is an EMP shield device that can be retrofitted to a transformer to protect it from the surge. That's the weak link, is the transformers. Without the transformers, you can't drop the power down. As Jeff was saying, it's fairly easy to replace those steel or aluminum suspension lines, but what you can't get a fast commodity are the transformers. So first and foremost, we would have to insulate every transformer in the country with a device and or replace the transformers. And then the big one is getting power lines underground. As you guys know, in Florida, things that are overhead are getting knocked over by trees. Wind is taking them down. So it would start, I mean, the new developments, everything's underground, but it's all fed from a main point overhead that then dips underground. So another big venture would be getting all the transmission lines buried which would provide significant protection against any type of weather or natural disaster.
So I have a theory that all of our electric lines are in the air here in Florida because of unions, and that there was years ago, there was a movement to try and get some of those lines buried, and the unions fought it tooth and nail because it's a constant make work project. But I've got one of the EMP shield devices here just for the home unit. You know better than I do. You've dealt with Andrew and EMP shield at a much higher technical level than me. Is this the same type of technology that they would just scale it up to protect a substation or transformers?
It would be the same thing. It would different voltages for different size transformers, and it would just be built to mount to the side of the unit, and you'd have your inline and then your outline, which would protect from that EMP or CME surge.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of money.
Well, I mean, Trump put a bill in. It was March of 2019. I believe I sent you that article where he was urging the country and businesses, especially, to insulate sensitive systems. And he had a bill passed with some money put away to start the process, but obviously that was put in the trash can when the new administration came in.
Okay, so I want to pivot to what the average American can do. But before I do that, I've been making notes here. I want to make sure I've got all the bases covered. So our grid is at risk because of potential EMPs. More likely would be a CME, right? A coronal mass ejection from the sun, kinetic terrorist attacks, just like the ones where, they shot up the transformers in Moore County, North Carolina. Logical attacks, meaning like cyber attacks over the network, natural disasters, World War III. And actually, I got to circle back to Jeff and Randy on this one quickly. Mike, you weigh in as well. What about drone attacks? I mean, so in 2019, when the Iranians took down the Saudi Arabia's #1 oil production facility, it was like 20 drones in 20 minutes, and that knocked out 5% of the world's oil production. So if memory serves me right, East grid, West grid, Texas grid, 50,000 substations, but 9 in total would take down power to 95% of the country. How easy would it be to attack them with drones? I know I briefly touched on it, but number one, do we have any defense against drones? Because I haven't seen any, really good defense against drones. And number two, how quickly could they knock those 9 out? I mean, it seems to me it would happen pretty darn fast.
Well, what we did to the Iraqis is we dropped carbon filaments over some of their substations, and they arced over and shorted them out. That could happen to us just as well, because most of those units and all that wiring is open. If you look at a power line, those cables are not insulated; they are just steel or aluminum.
Okay.
That's why you have all those big stacks of glass, insulators. It's the same thing at a substation. When you look at all those transformers there, and they got the little rods sticking up, and the wires come off. Well, once those wires at the top, they're not insulated. And what we did is we dropped carbon filaments across there, and they arced over and shorted them out.
How big? Like what would represent a carbon filament?
Oh, they were actually pretty small, because they did a whole ton of them. And one might burn out, but then 20 more land on it, and they're fairly, they're pretty tough, and they conduct very well. And we took down their whole grid that way.
So are you talking like feet, like 5-6 feet, or?
Well, the individual filaments might be, they might be 4, 5, 6 feet long, but they're thin, and you just put just like a dusting of them out there. It's almost like spider webs all over the place. And before you can get that thing up and running again, you got to shut everything down. You got to clean all that stuff off, and it takes time and it's a hassle, but you can do it, and it's relatively simple and relatively cheap.
I mean, with the drones though, you wouldn't even need to drop filaments. I mean, if you only need 9, you send up 100 in each area. Good luck taking them all down. And
you could do a kinetic attack on them with the drone.
Yeah, a large enough drone with some C4 packed to it, and you could blow the substation to shit.
But if you did like the filament one, you could fly over them at 200 feet. No one would hear the drone. Do it at night. No one would see the filaments coming down. Just all of a sudden, everything goes off, and nobody knows why.
I don't
to
know
Chris's
why.
point, I don't think we really have any defense. Now, I have no doubt we've worked out some of that in Ukraine, right? How we went back and forth. You've
Right.
seen that kind of develop on its own. But I haven't been privy to what they've learned on a defense. But I would have no doubt that we have them. But these points that we're talking about, to me, are just evidence that we're leaving them to do for our own self. Because really, we've known about EMPs since World War II, since we dropped those nukes. And we could have done something long before now to, certainly advance this system and have it more protective, but we haven't done it. And the reason I say that we'll probably do it to ourselves is because of the hack, or the little virus that Jeff brought up earlier. How that was done, because those things went for those specific centrifuges fans. That is the only thing on the whole planet it would affect. But what they did was they released it on the thumb drives. And then everybody got the virus, basically. Everybody got it. But if your system didn't have those fans in there, it did nothing. So it was a virus that just sat there dormant, doing nothing. It didn't harm anything. But we knew that back door was there. And instead of closing that off and protecting basically the public at large from that, we left it there so that we could use it and they did. And so I was in the military when this happened, and immediately after that happened, you could no longer plug one of those devices, any government computer or device, period, in an instant. So I don't, it may be the enemy at some point, but it's because somebody's going to let them do it, or our own people are going to shut it down themselves, and they've left it where it's very easy to do.
Yeah, there's always an attack and then a defense, and then someone comes up with a new attack. And you got to come up with a new defense. It's always back and forth.
Yeah.
They attack, and you find a way to stymie that. They have to come up with a new technology, and it's been like that ever since men have been killing each other with rocks and sticks.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest problems here is defense, for the most part, costs a hell of a lot more than offense.
Yeah.
I can buy a gun for $300 and kill somebody. But if they want to defend against any random person who might have a gun anywhere, which is what you would have to do, you can put bulletproof glass all in your house. You can fortify your walls. It costs tens of thousands of dollars to do it. So defense is expensive. And when you were talking about burying power lines, the reason California hasn't buried their power lines, despite all the wildfires, it costs a shit ton of money. I mean, they were talking, in the tens of billions of dollars for California just to bury its primary high voltage transmission lines. And that expense would have to be passed on to the consumers. And nobody wants that. Politicians don't want people screaming, why did my electric bill triple?
Right. General question for all of you. Feel free to jump in. Those Chinese weather balloons, what's the possibility that those balloons could be used, say, to drop filaments, like you said, or would they not be accurate enough? Or could they set EMPs off from one of those balloons that would be big enough to have any type of effect?
You could put a nuke on one of those things and they're up high enough. Yeah. But then you've started World War III, because once you set a nuke off over someone's country, I don't think they're going to make the distinction between, it was just for an EMP. The filaments, I don't think so, just because they're so damn high. Now, if you launched a drone from them, sure. But I mean, those things were cruising around at 30,000, 40,000 feet. That stuff's going to go everywhere. You're going to miss it.
All right. So, stupid question. Is there a way to generate an EMP without a nuclear device that would have a big enough impact?
Well, big enough, I don't know, but there's a thing called a magnetocumulative flux compression generator, which basically uses an explosion. You charge up two plates, you have an explosion, squeezes the plates together, and it's a conservation of energy. As the charged part of the capacitor gets smaller and smaller and smaller, the voltage goes up, up, up. And the Russians had developed some relatively small scale versions of it that they could put in an artillery shell or put into a tank round that you could fire it in the back areas and go off and fry people's radios.
What was it called again?
explosively driven flux compression generator.
right.
Magnetocumulative.
So am I the only one who's having like deja vu for Back to the Future and Doc?
That was capacitor. There's no,
That's right. That's right. It's a little different.
It's a relatively simple device. It's not that complex.
And I have no doubt we've developed one.
And as the device itself explodes, the antenna blows up and gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So the voltages go up. So you get a broadband effect. You can have it to where it's at a specific frequency, or you do one that gives you broadband.
Interesting. All right. So let's
I don't believe that China would destroy infrastructure just because you think of China, all the people running out of space. And then you think of the U.S. with all the space, all the resources. That town on the mountain in North Carolina that was wiped off, that's a whole different subject. But large lithium deposit with quartz as well, and they use the quartz to make semiconductors. So I would believe that they would want us to come in and basically destroy ourselves, shut the power off, 80% of the population gone, and then they come in and they take everything over.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So I want to pivot into what our viewers can do, and I want to paint it in two different scenarios. So short-term interruption to power versus long-term interruption to power. And Mike, I know you've got something that's like super innovative to show towards the end of this episode. So if you're watching, stay tuned in, because Mike has some very groundbreaking stuff that I guarantee you've never seen anywhere else. But let's just talk short term, okay? So let's say the power goes down for maximum of 3 weeks, and I'll give everybody a chance to answer it. Go to you first, Mike. What are your recommendations to people to be prepared for power outages that last as long as 3 weeks?
Well, the first thing is they say 2-week food supply is what they advertise in the city. That's not nearly enough. So minimum 3-month dry storage food supply. So if you don't have power, you can at least rehydrate food or have some emergency food pack. I mean, they're widely available. You can get the 5-gallon buckets that has enough to feed a family for a couple of weeks. So definitely food would be the number one. Water, and for anyone who's like, hey, I'm on a budget, I can't go and get water, I don't have a well, save your milk cartons, save your 1-gallon water jugs, and just start filling them and stick them down in a crawl space, stick them down in your basement. Just food and water always on hand, at least 3 months to get you and your family through a 12-week period. Number two is a backup power supply of some sort. I mean, you can start small. The backup power supplies that are coming to the market, you can start with a 50 amp hour, 100 amp hour battery and 200 watt solar panels that are foldable that you could put outside to keep those batteries charged. And what that would allow you to do is at least keep a cell phone going. Hopefully, in whatever scenario, we still got satellites and cell phone towers, computer. Recommend that if you can get your hands on an old school radio, get an old school radio and hold on to it, because the first communication that would come back would just be radio wave. Mm-hmm. But portable power is essential nowadays, even if you're small scale.
Good answer, Mike. Seriously, do you want to come work for Survival Dispatch? That doesn't pay worth a shit, but you're welcome to come work for Survival Dispatch.
I'm in.
So I'll just go around the loop here. Randy, what are your thoughts on 3 weeks or less? How do you prep for power being out?
Well, I think Mike covered that very well. You definitely also want, even for 3 weeks, because some people, like he just mentioned, and heck, I'm one. If I could go out and spend, $10,000 on bottles of water, I'd probably do that right now, just to have a stockpile of water. But I don't. But the other thing, what you can do is get, there are portable water filters. I'm not talking about the kind that's hooked up to your house, the big fancy ones. There are portable ones that you can drink out of streams and other things. You would want something, because water is definitely going to be important. You definitely want food, as he mentioned, and I don't know. And then you're just going to have to see what else is going on, because you might just stay home too, right? You don't need to be going out and getting in the middle of all that, because trust me, I know, and I've mentioned it many times on this thing, when that kind of thing happens, it seems like society has collapsed. And trust me, everybody's coming out of the woodwork to steal stuff and do all kinds of things. So
Mhm.
you may want to just stay in place, and hopefully you have the supplies to do that.
Jeff, before I get your input on that, Mike, don't hate me, but this is an
Oh, yeah.
Energy Flex, tactical flex power station, right? So this one,
Yeah.
the military is buying these up like nuts. Mike ordered one a while ago. It's still on back order, and they take extra batteries underneath them. So you can put 5 batteries on just the one inverter on the top of these. I've got a regular flex there, but this tactical flex one, man, you can, Randy, this is meant for the theaters.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen those or similar models. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that goes to Iraq and Afghanistan
right.
and whatnot
That's
now,
right.
because they're dust resistant, water resistant. And Mike, I'm sure you'll get yours soon enough. This is mine. You can't have it, but I wanted to show it to you just so you know they're real.
I had to go outside of the energy space so I could be good for now. So I have stuff, but I really want my portable unit.
I hear you. I hear you. So Jeff, before we go to you, Randy mentioned water filters, and this has come up a few times recently. I just want to mention it because it's so important, right? Water is the one thing that you have to have. And anybody who's gone any extended period of time will tell you that, yes, you can go 3 days technically without water, but by day number 2, you will not be thinking properly. And, pretty easy to check out from there. So we've been sent a ton of water treatment stuff over the years, Mike. And I actually started to refuse it a while ago. I was like, I don't want any more of that stuff, because every time it gets sent to us, we spend a ton of time and money and effort. We send tests out, and most of the stuff comes back and it's not worth a dang. So we're not in the business of hurting other people's businesses, but those big stainless steel ones that go on your counter, who shall remain unnamed, we were sent one of those. And when we sent the tests in for the water, we pitted it against a $30 Brita pitcher, and the $30 Brita did a better job of cleaning up the water than the $1,000 stainless steel
Wow.
unit. So take that for whatever it's worth. But these guys here, Sawyer, and y'all are familiar with Grand Thumb, I'm sure. This is his recommended water filtration device, and they make more than just this style. But Randy, this is, who Grand Thumb is, right? The serum.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
So I just want to give these guys a shameless plug, because they're the ones who actually got us re-engaged into the whole water thing, because I was turned off by it. Like everything we tested, just be like, holy, this stuff's crap. It's all like snake water.
That's right.
Ironic choice of words. But here's the thing. We tested these, and I like these ones are really simple. You can see they're threaded. So you can take like a water bottle. You can take the water bottle and fill it up from whatever water source, screw this on the end, and drink out of it. Each one of these is good for about 100 liters, so 25 gallons. But the really crazy thing is that the filter on these are the smallest, meaning the holes in them are the smallest of anything out there. And I want to say they put 22,000 different types of bacteria through it, and it stopped each one of them. And our tests have been really good. So if you're looking for water filtration, Sawyer, American owned, made in America, and these are just really good people that have really good products. So that's it for that shameless plug. So Jeff, what are your thoughts on prepping for power out upwards of 3 weeks?
I don't know if I can get it in the picture or not. Probably not.
Yes.
No, it doesn't want
That virtual background thing.
Yeah, I know.
It's almost there.
Can't see it. It's a big battery backup.
Oh, we got a spot of it. We did get to see it there for a second.
Well, it's not
Sure it is.
Yeah,
Sure
but
it is.
background. But it's got solar panels that go to it to charge it back up. And what was I going to do here is, and that is to keep the refrigerators going, to keep the freezers frozen. It's not going to, we accept that if power goes off, you're not going to have air conditioning. You're not going to have all these creature comforts, but you need it to keep your food supply secure, your frozen foods, and charge up your phones and, whatever else you need. But we also have a gas power generator in the garage for a longer term solution with, multiple cans of gas. But again, you don't run that 24/7. It's just to keep you secure, keep your phones charged up, keep your food safe. And what people need to realize, if the grid goes down, whether it's 3 weeks or 3 months, your lifestyle is going to change radically. And you
Yes.
almost need to plan for two different eventualities, the week or two or the month or year. And if it's a year and a month, you're going to need candles. You're going to need kerosene lamps. You're going to need, you're going to have to do what grandma and grandpa did
That's right.
in the old days. You have to go back to that. And they survived it just fine. You can too, if you have realistic expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And the food is, you have a short-term food, then you've got to think long-term. Okay, I've got 2 months or 2 weeks worth of food stored up. Okay, what happens? What do I eat in 6 months? And you can be what you're growing in your garden, what you've put up in your pantry, or it can be, look at the world around me. What's there that's edible? I mean, I'm in the desert, but prickly pear cactus, you can eat the pads. You skin them and fry them, and they taste like asparagus. There's a lot of things to eat in the desert. Most people don't think it. And the reason they all have thorns is because they don't want to be eaten, which means they're probably not poisonous. Poisonous plants don't need thorns. Edible plants need thorns.
Good point.
So
Before
if
we
the earth
move,
can eat it, so can you.
yeah, before we move on any further, Randy, I don't know if you noticed, but Jeff is sporting a new hairdo. He doesn't have a single gray hair.
Oh,
I do need diet for Halloween, so
oh.
I'm cutting it off soon.
I was wondering why you had the Angels hat on today. I've never seen you with a
That's
hat
an
on.
Arizona hat, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry, Arizona. I thought that was I could see it now, but I thought that was a halo.
No,
on
it's
top.
Arizona Wildcat.
Yeah.
That's too funny. Food wise, I will add, we've got 2 freeze dryers. So Cindy will freeze dry all kinds of stuff and vacuum seal it with O2 absorbers. And you're looking at like 25 plus years of shelf storage. But she got this crazy contraption. It's like a square box, maybe 18 inches, front to back, left to right, and height wise. And you can take like drumsticks and put them in a mason jar. And I'm talking raw drumsticks. Put them in a mason's jar, put them in this machine. It sucks all the air out of them, pulls that top down, that mason's thing. And I guess you put like water or something in it with it, but they will last for years and years like that without even having to cook, which is phenomenal. It's pretty crazy. I don't have a whole lot to add above and beyond what you guys had to say, other than I just wanted to mention Faraday stuff, so if you have, ham radios and whatnot, you can store them in Faraday bags. This is a pretty cool little one that I was sent not too long ago. So it folds up and you can put it on your keychain and just like that. But you can put your phone in there. So if an EMP happened, it wouldn't be hurt. But also when you put your phone in here, you disappear off the grid. You don't exist. There's nobody can track you by your phone once it goes in this. But Faraday containers, Faraday bags, good idea to have. And what we've done is we've taken some decent sized Faraday bags and filled them up full of stuff, batteries, flashlights, ham radios, all that kind of stuff, and just forget about it. And if the shit hits the fan, then we can open it up. We know at least what's in there will work. We'll add one more thing that somebody told me years ago is that if we did have an EMP, it probably wouldn't just be one EMP. There would probably be multiple EMPs. And for the life of me, I can't remember who it was, but they said if you have a bag full of stuff, a Faraday bag, you should have a second and maybe even a third Faraday bag, because chances are you have an EMP, you open the Faraday bag up, boom, here comes the second one. It just toasted everything in that bag. So 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. Jeff?
Well, I was going to say, safety tip on Faraday bags. If you put your cell phone in a Faraday bag, either A, turn the cell phone off, or put it in an airplane mode. Because what you'll find if you don't, when you open it up, your battery's dead because your cell phone is trying to reach out to a tower. It can't. So it just keeps ramping up its power to try and reach a tower. So you open it up, your phone's fine, battery's dead.
Good point. Good point. Okay, so let's move on from there. Now let's talk extended grid down. So we're talking now getting past 3 weeks, could be, many months or even a year without power. Mike, I'm going to you first. And obviously you're going to have to spend more money. Like if you're trying to, provide electricity at even a limited amount for any extended period of time, it's going to cost more money. But what are your suggestions, Mike, as far as prepping for extended grid down, whether it be a power source or any of the other things, staples that you need to survive?
So the first batch of things that I mentioned, larger scale on the food. If you're talking 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, I have a hefty supply of survival food tabs. Things get rough. You're not going to be eating freeze dried if you don't have enough. But they got these little survival tabs and horrible flavors. But when you're hungry, you put it in your mouth and it dissolves, and it's I think like 500 calories per tab. Those you can store months supply in a very small area. They're really good to put in your backpack if you got a bug out. So survival food tabs is a really, really good option. Again, doesn't taste good, but it'll keep you alive. Life straw, that's really good to keep a bunch of those, because 6 months, 12 months, you're probably not going to be sheltered in place that long. You're more than likely, if you're in a northern region, you're going to start to head south where it's warmer, would be my guess. So you're going to want the filters like you were showing, and power. That's where the energy comes in, right? If you're moving around, yeah, that thing with one battery is heavy, but it still gives you the ability to charge a phone, plug in a radio, an old school radio. So when communication comes back online, you can at least pick up a signal.
I don't know if you caught it or not, Mike, but on the weekend we showed a new Bluetti backpack, and the backpack itself is really high quality. It'd be like the Exo Mountain Gear stuff, which is those are the backpacks people would use to climb, Mount Everest, that sort of thing, that has a built-in power station. And you can remove the power station. So the one bag's like 42 liters with a power station that's 300 watts of output with 256 watt hours of battery capacity. And then there's a bigger one that's 60 liters, 700 watts of output, 512 watt hours of battery. The thing is huge, and ended up giving it to James from Pilgrim Ammo because he's the only guy big enough I know who could carry the damn thing. Like, it's absolutely massive, but pretty innovative on the part of Bluetti, to be honest with you. I really, dig stuff like that where people are thinking outside the box and making a backpack. So if you're a photographer or a drone operator, and those things love to eat batteries, what a great backpack for taking for that stuff, not including all the survival situations like you're describing there.
I would definitely, I haven't plugged it yet, but wind turbines, it's very simple. And the size of these wind turbines that you can buy, very simple mechanics. It's just metal wrapped in copper coils, and you just got to spin it. And the wind technology has come a long way. So if you're somewhere where you're going to stay, get some kind of, you can get a 3K, 7K, 10K. I just bought two 18,000 watt wind generators to put up on my property. So I'll have 36 kW being pushed out of these. And where I'm at, there's maybe 1 day a week where the wind isn't blowing. So if you're in an area and you got a steady wind, you just can't go wrong with wind turbines.
Randy, I want to get your input, your thoughts on extended grid down. So past the 3-week point, but I have a quick question first, just because Mike mentioned the survival tablets. Somebody told me at one point in time that all our special forces, that the MREs that you guys got are a lot better than what, say, regular infantry got. Is that the case or not?
No, that's absolutely not true.
Okay.
If it came in an MRE box, it's the same MREs that everybody else got. You know what I mean? There was 1 through 12 and 12 through 24. Now there are some that come in white, right? That are for, like, if you're in Korea and or Germany and it's very, very cold, they have a different set of MREs for that. But other than that, they don't have a special one. And the way that works, because that comes through DOD, and then Army would do that, or Navy. And although the Navy love their SEALs, they're just like the Army. They like to screw over their special operations guys. They don't like them for the most part. So they're not going to give them something special to eat unless you came up with it yourself. And we're too busy buying more armor, more guns, and more ammo.
That's funny.
But I will say the MREs are way better than the MREs I ate, and what they have today are light years ahead of what all the guys used to eat back in the day, and certainly all the way to Vietnam and World War II. the crap those people had to eat,
A rations and C
that's
rations.
right.
Well, LERP rations, long range patrol, is basically where MREs came from, because the LERPs had, the freeze dried food and stuff, because they would go out and they'd be out for maybe 2 weeks at a time, and they had to be able to carry food with them. But the LERP ration kind of morphed into the MRE.
Gotcha.
Well, and what they really probably saw was the SF guys were eating better because you also have an op fund every month. Like the last time when I was in Iraq, that was $40,000 a month is what we spent every month. Now that was to pay guards. That was for all kinds of reasons, but we also used it to buy food.
Yeah.
So we would have better food. So the long term, honestly, for most people, it's going to be a real shit show. This isn't going to be fun. This isn't going to be easy. And like you mentioned earlier, there are going to be a lot of people that die throughout this period. If we went without electricity for a year in the entire nation, we would not be the same on the other side of that year.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I can tell you. Everything will fundamentally change just from that alone. So for long range, you're going to really need some device like Mike's got that he's going to talk about here in a little bit. You know what I mean? Unless you've already got that wind turbine stuff going, or you get out there now and put it in place, you're not going to have it. And the ones out in West Texas, everybody knows, are just a waste of time. It's no different than solar panels. They sold people a bill of goods because they didn't do it in a way that's actually productive and that would help. They did it in a way that makes them money, and that's really all there is to it. Where we could have done it much better. That's for sure. One of the things I saw recently that I'm trying to get my dad to get out at his house right now were these hydroponic towers, right? And I'm speaking on, I don't even remember the name of the product, but if you Google hydroponic growing tower for vegetables and stuff, I guarantee you will find it. The cheapest one was probably $800. The cheapest package was probably $1,900, and then went up to like community was about $7,000. But man, the amount of vegetables and the stuff they grew out of these hydroponic towers was just unbelievable. I haven't seen anything like it. So I think that would be a really good resource for people to be able to grow their own vegetables, and certainly in a productive way where out there in your yard, it may not produce quite the same. Again, it'll come down to water. Yeah. And power is going to be one of those things that most people are not going to have. Yep, this is it.
Yeah.
These are it. And so pretty amazing stuff, man. I'm like, you know what? That is definitely the way to go, because everybody knows how hard home gardening is. Mm-hmm. And hydroponics has been a proven method of being able to grow things. I think they started with flowers and probably weed first. It was one of those things, but they're highly effective. So that would be a great resource to be able to keep your family, at least to have some good vegetables, you know what I mean? And other things that would be able to sustain you. The power thing is here. I think for most people, they're just going to end up doing without it. You're going to have to find ways to do without it. And, if it's seriously, if it's going to be a year, you're probably, if you live in a city like I do, I'm not staying here. But I saw what happened in Baghdad, in 2003, when we took it over and there was no law enforcement and basically society collapsed. It would be no different here. Everybody's going to come out and they're going to steal every last thing, even the stuff bolted down. So, to be in a very, very high populated area, it's going to be mass chaos. You'd want to get out of that area. That's what I plan on doing. I'm not going to stay in this area. I'm going to go to my dad's. He does have a generator. He does have a tank underground, but that's only going to last for so long. If it's a year, you're not going to have power. No. Because eventually, like you already mentioned, we'll run out of gas too, because it takes gas. It takes power to produce all that, from oil to gas and even natural gas. It all has to be passed along the system through the pipelines. You're not going to do any of that without electricity. You're just not. So eventually it'll come down to, you either have a device like Mike's that works on its own, or you're going to do without. And that's really the short of it. It's unfortunate because I think it's a real possibility that could happen with the way we look at the way things are going. I sure hope it doesn't. I pray that it doesn't, but it's something that we're very vulnerable to and very likely could happen just because of how devastating it would be. And unfortunately, I said, regular people, you're going to have to get out of wherever you are. If you're in a populated area, you're definitely going to have a way to produce food, because most people are not going to be able to store a year's worth of food or even water up. So, that being said, you have to think along those lines. What's it going to take to survive? And as we've mentioned on other panels, because I've noticed it lately on social media, people are like, well, I know how to live off the land. That's only going to last for a couple of months too, because when there's no food in the grocery store, guess where everybody's going? And sooner or later, there won't be any wildlife left, and it'll be sooner than later.
Yeah. Case in point, 1929, when the market crashed, within 2 months, it became front page news if somebody spotted a deer. And the population of the country is half of what it is right now. True story.
Oh,
2
for
months.
sure. Absolutely.
2 months and almost everything that could be eaten was harvested.
Well, Chris, I always mention the little tidbit that, our first settlement came with 104 people. 2/3 of them died in the first 3 months from starvation and sickness.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be any different for us. It's just a larger scale number.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Jeff, your thoughts on extended grid down?
Yeah, well, I touched on some of it. You got to be able to find food out there, grow your own. But one thing people don't think about, you get batteries, but you made long-term batteries. You think about, okay, your gun has a red dot. Well, that requires electricity.
That's right.
So if the batteries go dead, what do? I've got a backup sight on my gun that I can flip up and look.
Always have the backup sight.
Always have a backup sight. But another thing is, okay, eventually you're going to run out of juice. Your refrigerators are just going to become cabinets because there's no power to them anymore. And how are you going to preserve food? And old school, you're going to need salt.
Yep.
And the cheapest way and the biggest way to get bulk salt is to go to Home Depot and buy water softener salt. People, it's not as pure as what you have for. Well, okay, salt is salt. They all come from the same damn mines. I have news for you. The pretty stuff goes into Morton salt, and the not so pretty stuff goes into rock salt for your sidewalks. But it's still salt.
Yes.
So if you need to preserve something, you're going to need salt. But yeah, you just go back to your grandparents or great grandparents and say, what the hell did they do? Well, they had root cellars. They canned their own food, but that requires heat to sterilize. So do you have a stove that can burn wood, or do you have someplace where you can burn wood to boil water to preserve food? Do you have the wood available to burn? And you're not going to really, unless you're up north, you're not going to be burning that for heat. You're going to wear a sweater. You need that for cooking and to sterilize things and to preserve and to cook food, because you have all this rice. Have you ever tried to cook rice with cold water?
Yeah.
Doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things people don't think about that you're going to need to have either available, close by, or stocked up. Food, fuel, wood, salt, water, and you need a longer term source of water. You may have a well on your property. Good on you. You got to have something to move to run the pump. If you have solar, okay, that might work as well. But yeah, you got to think like a pioneer, because that's how you're going to be living, if you're going to be living at all. And the cities are going to die. They can't be sustained.
Quick.
Yeah, they'll die quickly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you're in a small town in a rural area with 20 miles to the next town, perfect.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, definitely agree. So I don't have a whole lot to add to what you guys have already said, and I want to see this device that Mike is going to shock the world with here. But let me say this much. If you have, let's say, a propane generator and average size home, and you want to have minimal electricity and you want to be able to cook with your grill, you're going to go through a 3.5 gallon tank of propane per day on average. I mean, you could be really miserly and cut back on that, but generally speaking, you're going to go through the full 3.5. So I don't know what the prices are where y'all are, but a 3.5 gallon tank of propane here in Florida is $67 if you don't have a canister to trade in towards it, right? So here's the number. That if you burn through one 3.5 gallon tank of propane a day and you paid $67 for each one, you would have to stockpile $24,455 worth of propane to get through 1 year. So I just did the math. So it's highly likely that that's not going to happen. But I mean, I don't have much to add other than you could have a solar PV system with battery backups. I don't think generator is a good choice. Like Randy pointed out, you're going to run out of fuel regardless. Could be natural gas, propane, or pump gas. You're going to run out of it. If you have some water on your property, maybe you can do hydro, maybe if you had running water, but not very many people have that luxury. And so you're down to wind, which is really interesting, solar and wind. And I don't even know what you call this thing, Mike, that you guys have invented. Like how would you categorize it? What do you call this thing?
We call it the sustainable power wagon because
right,
it's capable of sustaining power as long as you don't exceed the max watt output that we tell you.
All right, so unleash it on the world. Let's see this thing.
All right, Bo.
Essentially, the product that Mike and Bo have created will generate electricity forever without having to power it up with fuel or anything like that. I mean, it's got the potential to change the world, whether we end up in SEF or not. How you doing?
How you doing?
So what he did put on there though for backup is he does have a 100-watt solar panel. Got a 100-watt solar panel, and I am asking him to modify it to have a collapsible 2,000-watt wind turbine. So you got either the wind, the solar, but if you had to take this thing down in the basement and power something, you could do without, because it does generate enough power to keep the main battery charged. And we'll show you the gauges as he runs through it. So as he fires everything up, we can show you what the battery's holding at while it's still powering everything else.
Okay.
And he did put an EMP shield on it as well.
Right on.
Nice.
That's cool.
All right, Bo, you want to give a little rundown?
So basically, I mean, he explained it like as it is, basically. And also, like, if you it's got a couple options. Like if you want to charge it with it's got an onboard battery charger. So if it's just sitting around somewhere, you can just plug in the battery charger. Push come to shove, you can use your car as a generator because it has post on it to hook up jumper cables. It also has solar panel, like he said. And I'm kind of working on it to where it has a light on it, so the light works off of the charge controller. So if the charge controller is on, the light will work. So it has a light. It has a fire extinguisher. It has a self-extinguishing system inside. So if it's sitting around your house and if something happens, you ain't got to worry about it burning down your house. It'll poof itself out. So that's added. And of course, it has USB ports and Type-C port.
So is it running right now?
It's running right now. It's running right now.
So you're just running off the battery. You don't have
the turbine's on.
Fire it up.
Turbine's not on.
I was going to say it must be really quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, hit the switch. So it's super quiet. Here, stop rolling for a second, Bo. So it's not loud at all.
Yeah, you can barely hear that.
Then you go around this side, and you can see right now, it's holding at 15 volts.
Can you guys see that gauge?
Yep.
And this is the motor that's running right now. So that's what that's at right now. But I'm waiting for another part to where this won't even drain at all. So I got to tweak this to where when the motor's running, it's using less energy because the turbine is not really holding like I want it to. So
what's powering the motor? Like what's making the motor generate electricity?
The motor is a different separate battery. And what it does is I kind of trick it into like creating a loop, kind of.
Okay.
So it's creating a loop, and that the magic part about this thing is when I get the one part that this will never drain. So the battery that's running the motor, it stays 100% all times. So if this stays 100%, that means the main battery will keep juice into it too. It will stay 100%. With a load on it, I've had it as is right now, and it's not even done. It held for 6 hours. It lost a volt an hour with a TV, a light, and a fan. Okay. So it only lost a volt an hour, but I don't want it to do that. I don't want it to lose anything an hour. I want it I'm trying to basically create a car in this. A car you can let your car run, right?
Yep.
It'll keep power. I'm trying to duplicate that into this. So there's a few more tricks I have to do to it to make sure it stays like that.
So I want to make sure that we're clear for our audience. So basically, you have this battery powering this generator, but the battery never decreases in charge.
As long as that inverter is going. When that turbine is going, if it's turning, it's going to generate enough juice to keep the battery going, because the main battery is supplying power to the secondary battery. So that secondary battery then it's turning around and putting the juice back into the main battery. It's a monster.
So I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So when you turn it on and it's generating electricity, it could generate electricity forever and ever and ever without adding any external sources like another battery, a solar panel, and
Plug it in.
I suggest it maintains power. So wherever the battery is at, it'll maintain.
Okay.
Because right now I can't really say because it's charging too slow. It's not charging fast enough for me. I want to boost that up to where it charges faster. So when it's got a load on there, that's why you're losing a volt an hour.
Okay.
So I don't want to do that. I want it to keep exact whatever, like 12.5 forever when it's running.
So it's perpetually creating power without adding anything to it, like a generator. Yeah.
That's why I got the turbine. The turbine does that. You know how a turbine, it will generate energy, but I need to boost that up.
So as long as you don't drain the battery, you can turn it on and it'll charge itself back up to 100%.
Exactly. Well, the battery is not charging fast enough. So when you hit this switch, I want it to be able to do that from not zero, because it needs some kind of energy to start.
Yeah.
Kick it off.
If it's low, like say 11.5. If it's 11.5, this thing should be able to charge back up to 13 volts.
Okay.
But the turbine is right now is not doing that. It's for some reason it's putting out 14 volts, but I'm not getting 14 volts. Okay. I'm gonna have to do a little tweaking today to where when I hit this switch, I want it, if it's 11.5, I want it to go back up to 13. If this thing is in a cave or if you're underground, I want you to hit that switch, and whenever you got a load on it, I don't want it to drain at all. It's, it's gonna just stay exactly where it is. If you got 12.2.
That's why it's still in the prototype phase, but I've seen him out here with a refrigerator plugged into it, 1500 watt heater that's over there in the corner. I mean, he can sit out here for 8 hours with the TV, the fan, and the light on, and it's fine. But again, it's the prototype, but he's been working on it for a long time. I've seen it come leaps and bounds here in the last 2 years. Like I was telling you, I torture tested it with some power tools, and it was holding.
It dropped from with a vacuum cleaner. It went from 12.5 to 11.9 for 2 minutes. We unplugged it before it dropped any further than that. So it stayed with a vacuum cleaner for 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. It stayed 11.9. When you pull out the plug for the vacuum cleaner, it went right back up to 12.5.
Okay.
And that was immediately with that load, because it was generating enough juice to maintain, but the load kind of took a little bit out of the battery. But when you release the load, it went back up to normal power. And I've seen it do that, and it have done that. And like I've left it on all night, and even the guy came in the next day. He says he thought I was in the shop, but I just left it on all night with a TV and light on. And he called me. He said, "Hey man, are you here?" And I was like, "I said, you turn off the alarm. How am I there?" So yeah. I'm kind of figuring, like, even if you had a problem with it, you figure you go to bed at night, it'll keep going with a load for 6 hours guaranteed, until you go to bed, and it'll stay, still have juice in it. But with a refrigerators don't stay on all night, so they kind of cycle. So this thing 100% will cover your refrigerator, a TV, and a light. I wouldn't, like I tell Mike, I wouldn't suggest in a survival situation you go putting a 1500 watt heater on this. You can probably go with like a 500 watt heater if you want to do that. But I was in an emergency situation, I would suggest propane heater. Don't try to use your power. You want to use your power the less as you can. Your TV, your light, your refrigerator, 100%. You got forever. You know what I mean? But
So basically, let's just say there's no power whatsoever. There's no power in the batteries, but you have a solar panel or a wind turbine.
Right.
That charges up the battery initially so that it can run the generator. And then while the generator's running perpetual motion,
Right.
it's charging the main battery that looks after your appliances. So
Exactly.
once you kickstart it, theoretically, it should run forever. Once it's kickstarted.
Now, get this though. If this thing is outside, you can just forget about all that. It'll just keep running.
That's
If
off the solar.
If it's sitting outside, this solar panel is going to keep this thing going and keep it charged.
Okay.
It's the indoor thing I'm trying to do. Like I say, if you had to go underground, this thing, I want this thing to be able to go underground with you and give you power.
Essentially, you can't draw the system to kill the main battery. To kill the main battery, you'd have to wait for the sun to come up to charge it. But as long as you don't deplete the max load capacity and you're cycling, it'll always come back up. But it can run a 1500 watt heater for 6 hours continuously before it depletes the power supply.
Man, so I got to ask you, what's Kevin Harrington think of this?
We haven't showed him yet, and we don't know. We're probably not going to go to like a mainstream marketing once we get it perfected. It's going to be you got to know a guy to get it.
I want to be like Nikola Tesla and all those other guys, and they all died broke. So I want to be like those guys.
Essentially, once it's rolling, as long as you don't exceed what the output is, it will run forever is essentially the message.
Exactly. Right? And if you have to run something larger, you just got to make sure you shut it off before you kill that little battery, which is going to create the motion.
Gotcha.
So it's not an infinite, because there are rules to keeping it producing what you want. But in a survival situation, you could, like I said, you could pull this wagon out to the middle of the woods with a Starlink system, a computer, and a little refrigerator, and you'd be good to go.
Yeah, I'm thinking though, like in terms of somebody's home, that could be an integrated piece of a solution that includes you've got solar panels on the roof, and so it can always power that generator that's inside of that, and then you could always invest in more batteries like the flex systems, right? It seems to me like it'd be a really good, call it a linchpin between solar panels and something like a Tesla Powerwall, maybe not quite as big.
Yeah, they have a really good.
Well, its ability to generate that motion. I hear what you're saying. Yeah, if you could, especially with a 2,000 watt turbine in there, if that's able to keep going and continuously charge, if you're not pulling the load on it with a larger battery stack, like call it 800 amp hour batteries, once you get those up, you're going to be able to power more items with less of a kill on the batteries.
Yeah.
And then even then, when you cycle it for 4 to 6 hours, you can bring your battery banks back to 100, and that could just become a perpetual power charging unit where you're not pulling from that unit, but charging a larger battery stack.
So if you get ahead of it and you stay ahead of it, it should run forever, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, they also have a better solution. I had to talk to you about it some other time. I don't want to talk about it live because it's a device that you can add to your house that makes this thing way more simple. Like, say, if you don't have to go out and get no big generator for your house, because it's one little part that you can add to your house that you don't even need all that. And
That's what he's talking about. That's what I want to try in my house. I got 800 amp hour batteries.
right. No, I'm not talking about batteries. This is just the part that you add to your meter, and you bypass all of that extra work.
Well, we'll talk about
Yeah,
that.
I had to tell you about that because then you can add this to that, and it does your whole house instead of you trying to go out and grab a whole generator, and you only get certain parts of your house to work. This thing adds to your house, and everything works.
That's what he's talking about. You need
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Power and maybe some capacitors for the pull. But so it's a work in progress. Like I said, when we get the 5,000 watt unit going, we'll chat with you again, and I'll do some torture testing on my own. But right now, the basic model, the first unit he's got right here, it'll do small scale, but it would definitely be great to have in a survival situation because, like I said, you got a Starlink system. You could go out in the middle of the woods and you could have comms, and you don't have to worry about wind or sun if you don't need it.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. So until you guys manage to bring this to market, which I can see is probably not too far off
Far
as
out.
far as our audience is concerned for grid down situations. You know, invest in food and water, like Mike said. If we have any type of extended
Thanks,
grid,
Will.
invest in battery backup systems, generators, solar, all of those sort of things that we preach on a regular basis. And when we get something like this, I see that as being a really interesting piece to add. It's not meant to be like an all-in-one solution, but it's a really good piece of the puzzle, I think.
Thank you for letting us share that. It's still a work in progress, but again, you show some people, some engineer minds, and figure out how to tie it in and make it a piece of the solution. It could be a really good ad.
Jeff and Randy, if you got any comments or anything you'd like to add in general for our, you're on mute, by the way, Jeff.
Now I'm interested to see the final product and see what it can do, you know, in a real world situation there.
Yeah, I would just say you guys need to be careful, though. You know what I'm saying? Not just Nikola Tesla. He had some own issues back then, but there's been several innovators that tried to bring free power and free energy, and basically that's what that is. And, you know, bad things happen to those folks, so y'all be careful.
Doesn't it seem that way? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I had a couple quick things I want to mention before we do the conflicted question. I think Bo said something with regards to battery safety. I can't remember the exact context that he said it in, but have you guys seen this video on the e-bike battery that the guy takes into the elevator?
No.
This
I
is
haven't
really
seen this one.
this is really bad.
Wow.
This guy loses his life. This is really bad.
Oh.
Watch this.
Goodness.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
So they know what made it discharge, or just that was the moment?
So I'm going to defer to Mike and Jeff in a second, but one of the test battery or Randy that they do on these batteries is called the nail test. So they take a hammer and nail and they pound it in, not by hand, by the way. You're talking in a controlled lab sort of thing.
Jeez.
Yeah, he's dead. It killed him.
Oh yeah, it roasted him.
Yeah,
it's hurt him up.
I'll let him play one more quickly.
And that's his e-bike battery? Man.
That's an e-bike battery that he was taking into charge. The lesson of it is don't take e-bike batteries in an enclosed area where you can't escape, because like I said, one of the tests that they run against batteries and power stations, e-bikes and whatnot, is called the nail test. So they robotically pound a nail into a battery to see if it will catch on fire like that. So I'm not sure exactly what triggered that. Some sort of short, I have to assume internally, but this is recent. This just happened in the past week or so.
Well, those hoverboards that people were buying all their kids
Oh,
for
yeah.
Christmas a few years ago, those
Yep.
things would just burst into flames.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, the only reason I mentioned it is because Bo mentioned it there. I do want a shameless plug for Mike that empro.com, you can get EMP shield devices. So this one here is for 12 volt systems like RVs. This one is for your home system. It has a bunch of LEDs on it to show you that it's running. And if you look closely at the side of the power wagon that he showed us, you would have seen one of these little guys. And this is the EMP shield for your car, empro.com. Mike can get you hooked up across the country, supply and install on the EMP shield stuff. Insurance wise, I want to mention this is that if you install your own EMP shield and you end up having an electrical fire, it's highly likely that your insurance company will say that you have no coverage. When you go through somebody like Mike, who's licensed and insured, you have, somebody who's qualified to do it, and you won't
Knows what they're doing.
Yeah, they're not that difficult to install, but it's better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially what we see here in Florida with insurance adjusters basically saying, "Oh yeah, you got no coverage." They're not on your side. Put it that way.
No, they're not.
All right, so let's hit up the conflicted question. We'll put a wrap on this. You are the leader of a prepper group, and the grid has gone down. Months have passed with no major issues. One day, one member of your group asks for permission and your blessing to take a second spouse. Neither the intended second spouse nor the first spouse has any objections, and the three seem very much in love and supportive of one another. Do you agree to this union, and why? Jeff, I got to go to you first, not because it's tradition for us to always go to you first, but you had some interesting comments on the Mormons earlier.
Yeah. Okay. Religious aspect out of it, because everybody's religion is different. I wouldn't have a problem with it. I mean, yeah, and I look at it historically. Okay, yeah, you can go to the Bible. David, King David and King Solomon had multiple wives, blah blah blah. But more recently, when the Mormons fled from Illinois to Utah, one of the reasons they developed polygamy or authorized polygamy is because so many of their men were or died or were killed, fighting Indians and everything else on the trip. So when they arrived in Utah, they had a lot more women than they had men. If they had stuck to just, one man, one wife, they would have had a lot of people who were alone, but also they needed to build their numbers back up. And so that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons that they went to polygamy, because they had more mothers than they had fathers. Unfortunately, the way nature made it, one man can impregnate countless women. It's just a distribution problem. So as a little L libertarian, do whatever floats your boat. If you're not hurting anybody else and everybody else is on board, have a party.
And so myself, again, classic lowercase L libertarian, do whatever you want. Doesn't hurt anybody else. I don't really care, sort of thing. And I don't know why, but this just tweaked me. In 2012, I went and saw Andrew Dice Clay on his comeback tour in Vegas, and it was the very first night. He hadn't been on stage in over 20 years, and we had VIP tickets. And so the lady, she's walking people in 2 or 3 at a time and seating them. Then she'd come back and get the next group of people who had VIP passes. She put us in the front row. And I said to my wife, I said, I'm not sitting in the front row of an Andrew Dice Clay show. And there were these booths at the back that were elevated. So when she came back, I said, ma'am, I said, we paid a lot of money for these VIP tickets. I'm not sitting in the front row. Can we have one of those booths? And she said, sure, make me an offer. And I said, what do you mean make you an offer? I said, how much? She said, well, I can't give you a dollar figure. And I said, here's $100. Can I have that one in the mill? She said, absolutely. And thank God she did, because the people who ended up in our seats, Andrew Dice Clay, like he rode them.
Raked them.
It was really, really bad. But he ended up telling one of the jokes that my ex-wife, she absolutely hated this. And I'm not sure, again, why you tweaked me on this, but it's funny as heck. Back in the day in the 80s, Andrew Dice Clay used to say, I got nothing against gay guys. I love the gay guys. Every time I see 2 gay guys kissing, I think, right on, that's 2 more women for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he told that joke, and I had told it before in the presence of my ex-wife. And sure enough, I looked over and she was like this. She didn't see the humor.
Why she's your ex-wife?
Correct. I thought it was pretty funny myself, all the way back to the 80s. But anyway, Randy, what would you do in this situation?
Well, it's definitely a tough situation. Because certainly in today's time, the way people see things, and it's and in some ways, it's always been that way, as you mentioned. I go back to biblical principles, right? And in the Bible, God defined marriage as one man and one woman. He did not define more women for the one man. Although we clearly know, as you mentioned, David, Solomon, and many others had many wives. But what people have to realize, all those guys were wealthy. You can't go having a bunch of wives just because you want to. They cost money. And even after society collapses, we're in a survival situation afterwards. It would come into play. And in my personal experience, I've never seen those things work out perfectly, right? There always ends up being an issue. And of course, maybe in the beginning, in the honeymoon phase, everybody's all in love. But we know as time goes by and months and years possibly go by, that's going to change, and it could degrade and cause some real problems for you. So that would be my only issue with it. If they came to me and asked me my permission, I would not give them permission for that reason, because somewhere down the road, that's going to change. And listen, I've seen a bunch of them. We probably all have. It's just the way it goes. You know what I mean? It just is. Sooner or later, somebody gets jealous or upset, and things fester. So me personally, I would not want to see something like that, because, you know, that's the kind of behavior that got us in the situation of why it got society in the situation it is, and how we ended up out in the wherever it is after everything happened.
Fair enough. Mike, you got final word. What would you do as the leader?
In a post-apocalyptic situation, I would allow it for, I mean, if they're happy, they all agree, but main reason being is procreate and get numbers back up. And the more babies you put in the bellies, the faster the population comes back up.
Fair enough.
That's assuming we can all still have babies at that point.
Yeah, not all irradiated.
That's right.
Yeah,
or who knows what.
but it is
Yeah,
fun
right.
trying.
Yeah, they might have like 3 eyeballs and
That's
6
right.
arms, but you know, whatever.
But hey, it's a baby.
Sort of thing. But all right,
And-
listen, I appreciate
And everybody
all
knows
y'all.
the story of Noah in the cave. So I guess there are times that, you know, maybe that would apply.
Maybe. But anyway, I appreciate all y'all's time. Very innovative stuff, Mike. Kudos
Yes.
for thinking outside the box, both you and Bo. And again, I appreciate all you guys and appreciate everybody out there watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And God bless America.
Thanks, guys.
God
At
bless.
any moment, all electronics could cease to function. This includes your car, your home, your business, and our entire electrical infrastructure. Learn how you can protect yourself from a massive electrical disturbance today. Visit www.empro.com or call 833-EMP-PRO4 today.